Welcome to What Not to Do. I'm Kyle Schmitz, and I've got today with me Jeff Middlestead, Area Director of Fellowship of Christian Athletes here in Northeastern Wisconsin. It's a solid episode. He gives us so much, even marriage advice. So take out that pen and paper. We'll be right back. All right, I am here with Jeff Middlestead. He is the Area Director for Fellowship of Christian Athletes here in Northeastern Wisconsin. It's awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Kyle, for having me.
Yeah. Well, we've had coffee before. This isn't our first time meeting, and I loved getting to know your story, seeing your impact. You've been both in the private sector as well as in the social sector now in this season of life, which is exciting. So, but our listeners may not know and probably don't know anything about you. So, first of all, why don't you tell us just a bit about who you are and what you do?
My name again, Jeff Middlestead, Area Director for Northeast Wisconsin FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And I've been doing this position for 3 years. April will be 3 years. Prior to that, I owned a mortgage company with my wife for a number of years in Appleton, Wisconsin. I'm currently married to my wife, Sherry, for almost 18 years, and we have a son, Bryce, who's a freshman at Hortonville High School.
Awesome.
We have 2 dogs.
Is it the polar bears?
The polar bears.
Yeah, the polar bears. That's awesome. And fitting, this isn't obviously on video, but we just got, 7 inches yesterday? Yep. So fresh coat of snow. It's
Wisconsin, yes.
That's awesome. So, are you native to the area?
I grew up in Milwaukee. Yeah, okay. So I've been up here since early 90s.
Nice, okay. Awesome. And you haven't always been the area director for Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Right.
So kind of give me a little bit about just about your history and your career. Just kind of walk us through, where you started out and then how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, what's interesting, I was just having this conversation with my son recently, and we're talking about punching a time clock. And there's a lot of people who do that for their job. And I'm 55 years old. I got into the workforce when I was 16, working for a bowling alley.
Yeah.
So the first couple of years, I punched a clock working for the bowling alley. Then I got into the insurance business, and since I was 19 years old, I've punched a clock maybe 6 months out of that entire time. So I've always been in either sales or some type of commission work. Now, being a missionary, we are dependent upon donors providing income for us. So my life has been a little bit different than the normal.
Yeah.
And through that, there's been trials and tribulations and successes and failures and building blocks to, I believe, put me where I'm at right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. Is there any overlap between being, commission-based, where you're basically, you eat what you kill, to having to raise support via donations or charitable giving? Do you see any overlap there, or is it kind of two different ways of approaching it?
Yeah, I think it's there's a bit of an overlap. From a commission perspective, you're self-reliant. I mean, you got to go out there and work if you're going to put in the effort and the energy and learn whatever it is you're selling and believe in the product.
Yeah.
You kind of rely on yourself.
Yeah.
From the position I'm in now, is you're still kind of doing that. You're still kind of sharing your passion and your vision for what you're doing, but then you're asking people to invest in me or in the ministry that I'm a part of. So there is some similarity, but there is a difference too.
Yeah, different. And in a sense, both have a product or a service, but also different ends to those products and services, and maybe somewhat inspire others more to donate or to give versus to buy,
Right.
So that'd be really interesting. So cool. So, and you had experience some years ago in mortgage.
Yep.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
I became a mortgage broker in 2001 and worked for an independent company. Yeah, I mean, I remember I got started in May of 2001 and interest rates were like 7.5. And then sadly 9/11 happened and interest rates dipped. So I was in the business for maybe 3-4 months when rates were high, which was really good because I had to learn how to do a mortgage and develop relationships with realtors.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden rates plummeted and everybody wanted to refinance their house. So it really got to be kind of easy for a period of time. But I worked for a gentleman for 3.5 years. So prior to me going out on my own, and I was single at the time, and I met my wife, and she was in the mortgage or banking industry, and then we opened up Middlestead Mortgage in 2004.
Nice. Yeah. The collision of great minds, right?
Well, hers greater than mine, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a stint as a mortgage banker, some years ago, and I would not claim to have any expertise necessarily in the industry, but just some exposure.
Yeah.
And I remember, reading a stat, from that area of 2006, 2007, 2008, leading up to, the crisis that we had then, if you'd call it that. I think there was something like 17,000 ex-convicts had, or even 17,000 present convicts had their mortgage license.
Yeah.
Which is like, it was easy to get into the game and then easy to sell, and we kind of know the story. And not that you were practicing that way, obviously, but to kind of set
You're
the
not
context.
calling me an ex-convict. I want to get that straight for your listeners. I was not an ex-convict, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
But and I think that was in the state of Florida alone. And
yeah, that's true.
But
that's
it kind of painting the context. It just was an interesting. It was kind of like the Wild West.
It really was, and not only did you have people that probably shouldn't have been in the industry, like you mentioned, but there were products that shouldn't have been in the industry. I mean, you could do, there were NINA loans, no income, no asset. So, you didn't even verify it if somebody was working, and they could get a mortgage, and it was kind of crazy time. Crazy.
So then, help to bridge the gap. So, mortgage, and now you're the area director for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So, some might say, well, where's the overlap there? How'd you get there? So kind of walk us through it.
Yeah, well, it's a good story. I did mortgages from 2001. Actually, I just turned in my license in 2018, but doing it full time up until 2009. Yeah. 2009 is when I became a Christian. Yeah. So my life, the Lord turned my life 180 degrees. So from 2009 until 2000, to the time I accepted the position with FCA, there was a gap there, and that's where I was floundering. I was reinventing myself in a sense that priorities were different. I was no longer money motivated. So how do you find a job where you make money to support your family, but that at the same time do what you think the Lord is leading you to do? So from 2009 until 2016 was a difficult period in life. More from two ways. One from an income standpoint and one from an identity standpoint. I'm 55 years old, so back then, I was 45. So between 45 years old to 55, it wasn't a midlife crisis, it was an identity crisis. Yeah,
that's so interesting. And learning how to rethink about the world, right? It's almost like, so you took off your glasses and someone gave you a whole new pair of lenses, and you just see things in a lot different way, a lot different light.
Right.
And I can imagine that. So then how did you come across the opportunity then with FCA?
Read a book, a magazine. FCA used to print a semi-monthly or every other month magazine, and I subscribed to it. I was trying to do some investigating on going on a mission trip to Germany. I played baseball most of my life, and there's a church in Nashville, I think it was, that goes every year to Germany on a baseball mission trip. And I thought that would be appealing, so I was doing some investigating on that, came across FCA. I'd never heard of them before, even though they're 65 years old. Got this magazine, and then finally decided to read it. I would throw it away or put it on my desk and not read it. Read it one day, and then all of a sudden the idea of bringing sport and Jesus together and having some type of ministry, it was appealing to me. So I started investigating, and here we are.
And here you are, yeah. That's awesome. So why? So why sports and Jesus? And why student athletes? Like, how does this all... What's that that pulse or that heartbeat within you that's saying, this is why I do what I do?
Well, I think that from 2009 to 2017, when I accepted the position with FCA, I was in that identity stage, floundering and trying to really dedicate my life to what Christ wanted me to do.
Yeah.
And I didn't have an answer. I'm not educated. I don't have a college degree. I have a diploma, high school diploma. So I didn't go to seminary. Pastoral ministry didn't seem like that was an opportunity.
Yeah.
My family went on multiple mission trips, so we've been out of the country seeing how people live in third world countries and how different that is compared to how we live here. And so ministry was on my heart. I just didn't know what it was, and I wasn't qualified. So I had to mature in the Lord and really devoted a lot of time spending reading Scripture.
Yeah.
Getting involved in the church, and although there were things that I thought I wanted to do or was capable of doing, none of those doors opened. So when the opportunity with FCA came along, the attraction was sports, as I've been sports-minded all my life. So I love the idea of the sport thing. Then ministry, I was pursuing ministry of something, and now all of a sudden you could do sports and ministry at the same time. And I think that part of it was I have a son who's a freshman in high school. So the idea, and he was just starting to play basketball. So him getting involved in sport, seeing the dynamics of families and AAU sports and club sport, all of that, and seeing the direction that that's going, which concerned me. The idea of ministry and sport and bringing all that package together, it seemed to make sense. So in God's timing was perfect.
Yeah, and not to mention the entrepreneurial spirit that you had experienced in the past, building a mortgage business, and then seeing how there's a sense where you have to take kind of a business approach even to building out something that is a ministry, right?
You really do.
And so kind of neat to see how all these things came to work together finally, which is just awesome. And you casting the vision not just for yourself, but even for your son and for others, which is really cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hey, this is Kyle. Well done on your decision today to be great. Those are my kiddos in the background. Hey, if you want more of this kind of content, find me on social media. We'll keep the conversation going. You can hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, at StartWithWNTD. Again, at StartWithWNTD. We'll see you there.
So let's get into it. But before we get into what not to do, I want to hear, and I think our listeners want to hear, talk to us about what you did right, because you've obviously had some successes, which is great. You're experiencing successes now. As we know, it's never just a straight line, right? There's zigging and zagging, there's ups and downs, that type of thing. But you can't experience any level of success unless you've done something right. So talk to us. What are a few things that, as you look back over the course of your career and your journey, are things stick out that, said, hey, I really did this right,
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say being willing to take risks. Maybe foolishly, early on, foolish risks, and as you mature or experience things, maybe you take more calculated risks. But without risk, I wouldn't have done most of the things that I've done. So for me, I would say, think if it's something you're passionate about, then the only thing that's keeping you back is fear. So fear is the detriment. Risk is going to overcome that. And the whole thing is, if you fail, then you do something, you do it a different way in that same field that you were passionate about, or maybe you do something different. But failure is not a bad thing. So risk-taking, I think, is the key.
Yeah, kind of like you mentioned earlier when you're talking with your son about how a lot of people just punch a clock. And sometimes people think that's like a safe position to be in. I think they don't realize that there's actually quite a bit of risk just being in there and leaving up your livelihood, your source of cash flow, your means to provide for your family up to somebody else and their dreams, right? And what they're trying to accomplish in life. And that can be great. There's nothing against if someone wants to do that, but I think they should be well aware of the risks that come with that.
Right.
If they're not either in business for themselves or have another means of cash flow or financial independence where, hey, if this goes under, I'm done, type of thing. And so I agree. I think all of life is risk. It's a matter of having to take measured risk and that type of thing. And oftentimes the entrepreneurial endeavors that we take, sometimes a lot of folks that do just punch the clock, they kind of look at that and do, well, you're just being foolish, and they maybe don't have a helpful perspective as far as, no, there's all of life is risk, right? We're not promising anything. We're not guaranteed anything. We don't deserve anything. We got to go and earn it. We got to go get it. So
good point. Early on, I think I was 10 years old, maybe 11 years old, and we had a gentleman that was a factory worker, and there's nothing wrong with that. That work needs to be done, and that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he worked for this company for 40 years, and he was retiring, and the day that he retired, and this is not a lie, the day he retired to punch the time clock for the last time, he had a heart attack and died. So he had just punched his clock and literally punched his clock. He was gone. And that I kind of knew right then that I didn't want to do that.
You didn't want that to be your story.
Yeah, that gave me the idea of maybe thinking, at least early on, that that wasn't what I want to do. So taking risk came. I don't want to say it came naturally, but it came. I was open to it.
Yeah. Well, you saw what you didn't want, right?
Exactly.
And you said, if I don't want that, then that means I have to go about it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so what'd you do wrong? It's amazing. When Jeff and I were talking about doing the show, you mentioned, well, are we gonna have time for all that? And that's how we can do multiple episodes.
Yeah, right.
But as you're thinking back, through your story, your career, your experience, what's one or two things that really kind of jump out and say, man, if I could just have that opportunity over again, if I could do that differently, if I could, what would you see as one or two of those kind of highlighted failures throughout your career that cost you?
And that's why I appreciate what you're doing with this podcast, is you're trying to educate people to help them not reinvent the wheel. I was a lone wolf. I thought that I knew everything, thought that I could do it the best, or at least wanted to. Being a risk taker comes with ego and pride. And so if I was able to do it over again, or advise somebody, would be to get counsel, get wise counsel of people either in that industry or passion that you have, and be a risk taker. Go after it, but don't be so prideful that you think you've got all the answers. So that would be number one. And number two is, if you're going to take a risk, take it fully. For us with the mortgage company, my wife is much more conservative, comes from a conservative background. And she didn't want to just open up a mortgage company and go after it. So we had to work together, and by doing that, I really submitted to her desire, and we ended up getting a partner that really wasn't beneficial to us at all, and actually cost us in the end. So instead of diving in and just trying it and trusting that we could do it, she wanted to have that safety net, that backup plan, and that did not work out well. So those would be the two big things. One is, not having the ego and lessening your pride, and then also, if you're going to do it, do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so don't go it alone. Seek counsel, seek others that have had the success. Like you said, in a sense, what this podcast is learning from others who are where you want to be or hope to be, and learning not only what they did right, but also what they did wrong, so you don't have to make those same mistakes.
Exactly.
So do you have an example or a story that comes to mind where, specifically where you decided to go it alone and it just came back to bit you, betcha?
Going back to the mortgage thing again, I worked for a guy for 3 years. Now, I felt I knew they say a mortgage person, if they get it, they're going to get it in 18 months. Well, there were thoughts of opening up my own business, at a year into the business. I found some success and rates were good, so it was all that. But I elected to stay with this other company for 3 years because I wanted to learn. The owner was very knowledgeable. He taught me a lot of stuff. So I believe that I got as much education and information I could from him, and then I was ready to do it on my own. If I would have went sooner, I think that would have been a mistake. So don't be overzealous. You should be risk taker, but also you want to be prepared. So I think that was a good thing. That wasn't necessarily a mistake.
Yeah.
The mistake was having the knowledge that I had and being confident that I could do it, and then letting my wife influence me of having that safety net, which really, not only did it cost us from a perspective of having another voice in the mix that had a say in what we did, which was not good, but in the end cost us a lot of money because we had to buy them out, in essence, and that was just a bad deal all along.
Are you willing to share a dollar sign about how much that cost you?
You know, I don't even, because we had to pay on like a monthly basis. It was rent. You know, we categorized it as rent, but it was really like a referral fee.
Yeah.
And then we had to buy them out. So, I mean, it was
7 figures.
No.
6.
Probably 6 figures at the end of the day.
Yeah, and really, those things seem like they play off each other. The reason that you want to go seek counsel and not just try to go it alone is because you want to go all in. And so having the right preparation by seeking the counsel, by seeking the expertise, really empowers you to then go all in, because you've equipped yourself now. Whereas if you didn't quite seek all the counsel and all the direction that you needed, and you're just kind of thinking, oh, I've been doing this for a year or two, or I've got all the success, I got this, you don't know what you're talking about, that type of thing. And then it can maybe cause even subconsciously, some insecurities or doubts of saying, can I really do this? And then you're kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And when it comes to risk, that's a recipe for failure.
Right.
And so that's interesting how those two things can kind of go together like that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And I can understand. I mean, obviously, our wives, our spouses, they've got a lot of wisdom, and it's good to draw that out, right?
Sure.
And unfortunately, in this situation, it was the wrong decision, and you take ownership and you move on, right?
Yeah,
you learn
that's right. Yeah,
and go from there. So.
What was cool about it is that it didn't affect our marriage. We worked together hand in hand because she was part of the business, and it was just we had to move forward.
Yep.
The decision had been made and done, and we just had to deal with it, and we had to make the best of it during it. So,
sunk cost and go on, but So to re-sum up that up, I mean, you'd say don't go it alone.
Yep.
And
don't go it alone initially. Seek that wisdom and counsel.
Right. Yeah. And don't have 1 foot out, 1 foot in. When you're ready to go, be all in.
Be committed.
Do what you need to do to prepare. So don't go it alone. Seek out that counsel, get that wisdom, get that advice, whatever you need to do to equip, so that you don't have 1 foot out, 1 foot in when you're ready to dive.
Yeah. That's good.
That makes sense. Burn the ships, right, as they say.
Yeah.
So if you were sitting down with, let's say your son or someone else was saying, they're coming to you, they knew that you had a good run in mortgage, or they really like the ministry component that you're involved in now, and they said, hey Jeff, help me out. Here's where I'm at, and I want to get to where you are, in mortgage or in in some kind of ministry capacity. How would you counsel them? What would you go back and do differently in your own life, and how would you use that to help counsel them so that they can avoid the same mistakes, not have to reinvent the wheel, in their own journey?
One of the things that I talk to with my son specifically is the difference between transactional and relational.
Yeah.
And in relationship, when you're trying to sell something, or when you're trying to do something, or you're motivated to push a product, or even in ministry, looking for donors, and if you approach it with a transactional perspective, not only do people see right through that, but you're not developing any kind of long-term relationship. So when you approach it from a relational perspective, and it's a give and take, like, yes, I'm trying to sell you something, or yes, I'm looking for a donation from you for ministry, I now approach it differently, where I'm saying, okay, how can I help you? Is there something I can pray for you about? Is there something that we can do together? Is there questions you have regarding ministry or, biblical principles or what have you? So it's a two-way street versus a one-way street. And often in my life, I was very much a one-way street, because I was motivated to get the job done. I was motivated to make money. I was motivated to get as many donors as I could get. And when that's transactional, man, you just lose it. So the idea of relational and building relationships, whether they buy something from you or whether they donate to you, it really doesn't matter. And in the end, everything will work out, but you'll have relationships versus people that, look at you as a pariah, somebody that they don't want to spend time with.
Right, and maybe they don't buy it, maybe they don't donate, but maybe they refer. Right, and it's it's interesting how we have to remember that we're dealing with people. We're dealing with folks just like ourselves. They've got a story, they've got a family, all that kind of stuff. And it's just sometimes in business we can make it all about the data and the numbers, where we just forget that we're dealing with people here.
Yeah.
Like let's serve them. Let's have their best interest in mind. Right. Let's give them something of value, and to make sure that we're keeping them at the forefront of our mind in all things. Yeah.
So now put that together with somebody that has a passion for something, wants to be a risk taker, and has a challenge in front of them.
Yeah.
It's very easy to be transactional, even when you have a good heart and you're trying to, and you care about people. Transactional relationships are so easy. You got to really be guarded against that.
Yeah.
And put that at the forefront of your mind is what you just said. The people are people, and they're going through something that you're not aware of, or whatever. They may not have the same passion that you have for a product or for a ministry. So you just got to be really careful. Yeah.
So what's a practical way of something of in that situation and really caring about the relationship, cultivating the relationship, that you would to that young guy that's coming to you for that counsel and direction, if he said, how does that look, Jeff, or what does that mean, or give me an example, what would you say?
Well, first, that there's the idea that I think it's 7 degrees of separation or 6 degrees of separation or something like that.
Yeah.
In a small community like Appleton, Wisconsin, it's 1 or 2 degrees.
1.5.
1.5 degrees, right. So, you're talking to somebody, and if you're transactional, they're going to tell somebody, and that person's going to know somebody you know. And so just from the simplicity side of it, be aware that people are going to share good and bad.
Yeah.
And if you get a reputation of somebody that doesn't care, that's going to spread. So that's one. The other is to have a caring heart about somebody else is when you think less of yourself. Just the idea that you don't know what somebody's going through. So you might be having a meeting with somebody, and that person just had a fight with their wife, or their grandma is sick and in the hospital, or whatever. Just understanding that people are going through things that might affect that one-on-one 10-minute conversation you're having, that you want to try to sell something or do something, that they're not in the right mind or place to even listen to you. So I think for me, I'll tell you what it is for me, is I had a lack of compassion for other people. And that's something the Lord's taught me, is to be more concerned about others than yourself.
Yeah, we all bleed the same at the end of the day. That's good.
Hey, I hope you're taking notes from today's podcast, gleaning amazing insights and hopefully tactical things that you can apply today in your journey. If you've been helped by this, I'm going to challenge you. Help somebody else, and you can do that by sharing this podcast with them. And join me in my mission to make the world be great.
So before we get into our last section here, we are at Copper Rock Coffee Company. We're at their location in what is this? West Appleton?
North Appleton.
North Appleton. It's awesome. What are you drinking?
I'm having a non-fat latte with sugar-free vanilla syrup.
Awesome. And I'm rocking the a breve latte. I'm usually a black coffee guy, but it's a Monday, so I thought we'd make it dance a little bit.
You got it. Start the week off right.
That's right. So let's talk about mentors. We all have influence in our life. It's almost inescapable, right? Whether it's celebrities or people that we read, or parents, or whoever it is, pastors, coaches, etc., friends, family. We're always being shaped by those that we're around. But I'm curious, for you, is there one person or who comes to mind when you think of your success, your formation in life, all the way from the time that you were born to now? Who comes to mind?
From a secular side, Hank Aaron. Hammer and Hank was a Milwaukee Brewer in the end of his career, a Milwaukee Brave in the beginning of his career, and an Atlanta Brave. And he, to me, just epitomized what sport's all about.
Yeah.
You know, he was a great player, a five-tool athlete. He could throw and run and hit. But he handled himself classy on the field and off the field.
Yeah.
And I just remember when he was breaking Babe Ruth's home run record, his life was threatened, his family was threatened, just during that tension of race relations back in the 60s and 70s. And I just admired how he handled himself. And that shaped me in more ways than I really even knew.
That's awesome.
At the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Isn't it amazing? Have you ever met Hank?
No.
Isn't it amazing how especially with technology and media in different forms, whether it's books or even obviously with the internet today, folks that we'll never meet in life can often have the largest impacts on us.
Yeah,
it's just amazing. Or maybe in this case, someone in history or even further back, or someone that lived 500 years ago, they can be so formative for us, and we'll never have the pleasure of meeting them, at least on this side of heaven, right? Which is really neat. It's awesome.
Can you do that at the same time?
All right, so fun question. We're sitting at a coffee shop here, and let's pretend the folks at table number 5. You hear them. You hear one of them say like, "Oh, you should go do this, that, the other thing." It's the worst advice you've ever heard. Makes you cringe. Makes you want to get up and just go interrupt and say, "No, don't do that." Right? What's some of the worst advice you hear floating around these days?
Is my 11-year-old son a major league worthy baseball player?
I'm interviewing.
Interesting question. Okay, so talk me through that one.
I had a part of ownership of the Player's Choice in Appleton, and got to hear parents talk about their kids and not only see the amount of money they invested in them, but ask questions that were ridiculous, to be honest with you. You know, like asking the coach, does my son have the ability to play Major League Baseball as an 11-year-old? And so, to me, sport has grown into a business versus a joy and a wonder of just playing a game. And so that's concerning to me with the ministry that I'm in, but also that question I hear often, and I want to challenge that.
Yeah, it seems like they're wanting the short answer, the short path. He either has or he doesn't, and we're going to move on. And well, I'm sure genetics can play into someone's athlete. You can't change how tall you are, or your bone structure, all that kind of stuff. But they would be discounting or seemingly leaving out a major formative period of the child's life.
Absolutely.
That maybe 11 years old, maybe the answer is no. He doesn't have a lot of nationality. He's very uncoordinated. No. But maybe with the right devotion and training and coaching, all that kind of stuff, he could blossom into quite a wonderful athlete. And like you said, and I know you know Scotty Smith over at Synergy Sports. He talks quite a bit about how in our day and age there's too much specialization in one thing, and especially the younger a child is to get them kind of broad exposure to different sports and that type of thing, to cultivate a more well-balanced athlete. I know he talks about Patrick Mahomes having that type of thing, and he's got his trainer coming up to speak at the conference here in just a few. But really interesting perspective to where you said like if parents are taking it too much of a business approach or too much of they might actually be short-circuiting the process and the development of the child's athletic abilities, where he could have that promise, but
possibly,
depending on how they're approaching it.
I don't know if it's just a different world we live in, whether parents are living vicariously through their kids, as wanting to be still playing or something, or
could be.
The idea of 1% to 2% of kids play college sport, and that's including Division III. So Division I, Division II, Division III, 1% to 2% of those kids are going to make it to that level. Not everybody's going to. So what kind of service are you doing to your child, to your family? It's a question that needs to be asked, but it's not being asked as often as it should be.
That's interesting too, because it's like
What do you think this one could turn into?
Even if the child didn't want to play in college, why not enjoy it now? Still play to win now, but know that that's okay, And if you're going to do it the best of your ability now. Yeah. But it's interesting. I would see the temptation to, wanting to see my boys get on the football field and crush some people, things that, or take it further than I ever did,
Sure.
But that can really skew the parenting-child relationship if you're not careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, last question. It's rush hour, every major city in the world, and you get a billboard. Billions of people are going to see this. What message do you want them to see?
Jesus is the only hope.
Yeah.
Really. And because I'm dealing in that sport world and ministry world, and kids have their identity wrapped up in the sport they're playing. And, we're seeing kids now not playing high school varsity type players, not playing sport because they're burnt out. We got kids that, don't understand that their career is going to end when they're 18 years old or 22 years old if they did make it in college. And their whole identity is wrapped up in the sport that they're playing, and then they're done and they're lost. So from that perspective, I would like for people to understand that there's more to their identity than just sport, and I love sport. But the second and most important thing is that their identity hopefully is in Christ, because there's more to life than playing sport or work or making money or whatever.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, even with building a business or whatever you might be doing. I mean, if you're staking everything in your worth and your ability to have that success, what happens when you fail? What happens when you inevitably fail, right? That's kind of what you're saying, especially from an athlete's perspective. They work so hard, they train so hard, and they get cut, or whatever it might be. And if they don't have a hope that transcends their work and what they're trying to build, which is good, right? Trying to build a business or trying to build your career, all that other stuff. If they don't have a hope that transcends that's a superior, ultimate hope, and namely in Jesus, then what good is it? Yeah, that's interesting. Awesome, Jeff. This has been amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I really, really enjoy it. If people want to get a hold of you, they want to get in touch with you, know more about you, or support what you're doing, or whatever it might be, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
I go to the website, the wisconsinfca.org website, and look for Northeast Wisconsin. That's probably the easiest way. I'm
awesome.
Local, so obviously I'd love to meet up for coffee or lunch with anybody that's interested.
And do you have an email that's on there that they can shoot out and reach out to you?
jmiddlestead@fca.org is the best way.
Very, very cool. Well, Jeff, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Kyle, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hey, what a great episode with Jeff. Let's recap. First, Jeff said, don't go it alone. Don't go it alone. It's not the first time you heard that advice, and it won't be the last. Look, we are humans. We're prideful often, and we're often tempted to just try to do everything ourselves. Maybe it's a defense mechanism. Maybe we just think we're better than everyone else. We have a hard time trusting others. But look, we are social creatures. We're communal creatures. We need a great team around us. And you've heard it said, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with others. And so Jeff says, don't go it alone, go with others. And this leads into his next point. He says, don't have one foot in, and instead be all in. Well, here's the deal. If you try to do it all yourself, you either consciously or at least subconsciously know that you can't. Then it brews these insecurities in you and causes natural hesitations. And at the end of the day, you've got 1 foot out, 1 foot in, and that's a recipe for not success. You guessed it, for failure. So don't do that. Don't have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Be all in, burn the ships, one thing, focus, baby, and it's yours. So, hey, thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with Jeff, his contact info will be in the show notes, but also his top 3 books. What are Jeff Middlestead's top 3 books? Well, check out the show notes. They'll be there and links to them, and you can add them to your reading list. Have you been helped by this episode? I hope so. Have you been helped by this podcast? Man, I really hope so. And I will challenge you yet again. If you've been helped, go share this. Share this podcast, text it to a friend, post it on Facebook. One of the best things that you can do for us is give us a 5-star review and help us get this message of leaning into failure out to the world. Well, it's been said that good men learn from their own mistakes, but great men they learn from the mistakes of others. So go, be great, and we'll see you next time.